You're listening to The Weather Junkies.
Oh boy. Large wedge tornado coming up into Tuscaloosa. A winter storm warning is in effect for our area.
So we can expect at least another 2 to 4 inches overnight. Then that snow.
The National Weather Service in Huntsville has issued a tornado warning for northwestern Massachusetts.
15 to 22 inches of snow!
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Weather Junkies. I'm your host, Dakota Smith, out in Colorado. Another beautiful day in Colorado. I believe it reached 80 degrees here. I was outside for a little bit and actually felt too warm for March. So that was a little weird, but otherwise, awesome weather. The big story this week is the snowstorm in the Northeast, and we're going to dive into that a lot tonight. But we have a very, very special episode. Tonight is basically all the weather podcasts, almost all the weather podcasts, coming together and chatting about whatever's on our mind. No real topic tonight. We'll just see where it goes. And we're going to introduce each podcast to share with our followers something new to listen to on your way to work or way home. So let's start doing that right now. We'll start with our guest from the Weather Brains, Bill Murray. Bill, tell us a little bit about yourself, Weather Brains, and where they can find you on Weather Brains.
Well, Dakota, I was factory designed to be a meteorologist and sort of talked out of it by some well-meaning National Weather Service people in the late 70s and early 80s when I was deciding what to do. You know, their advice was, why would you want to work shifts for the rest of your life? And so that became my first piece of career advice for everyone out there who wants to be a meteorologist. Don't let anyone talk you out of your dream. Now, I ended up, with a computer science background and running hotels of all things. So it took me about 11 years to get back to weather. And I did that by being on television on the CBS affiliate in Birmingham on the weekends and loved it for 5 years. But there came a point in my career in 1996 where I had to decide what to do, and the most logical decision probably was to follow the hotel career, and I did that. But I kept my feet in the weather as much as I could. James and I formed the Weather Factory, which was the weather company back then. It's so weird to me to see the Weather Channel, referring to itself as the Weather Company, because that was our name. They actually, bought our name from us a few years ago. But along the way, I kept my feet in it. We've done, a ton of stuff with the Alabama Weather Blog, and we started Weather Brains, which is our podcast, over 12 years ago now. It really was just a fun outlet to talk about the weather. It sort of morphed into an interview show. And, we started having all these, great guests like you guys all have. I mean, you have superior guests on your shows. I really fault y'all now for eating up any free time I had, because the podcasts you guys are doing are just spectacular. We used to say that we were the best podcast on weather because we were the only podcast about weather. And now we can't say that anymore. They've got some great shows out there, and I think it's wonderful. I know James says the same thing. The more the merrier. What Marshall's done on the Weather Channel, what all you guys are doing in podcasts is just fantastic. So we love that. You can find us at weatherbrains.com. You can find my forecasting work on alabamawx.com most of the time. I'd always fancied myself as a weather historian, and haven't done as much tweeting about that lately. I'm going to start back soon, but I love writing stories about weather history, and I love collecting those and posting them. So that's a long answer there, Dakota, but we sure had fun having you on our show Monday night. And
yeah, that was a great time.
This is a great idea to share panelists. I just love it. So anyway.
Yeah. So if you don't know, Weather Brains basically set the foundation for most of the weather podcasts that exist now. So thank you for doing that, kind of paving the way there. And I believe the second weather podcast that cropped up, at least to my knowledge, was the Carolina Weather Group. And we have two panelists from them tonight. We have Shay and Ricky. If you guys want to introduce yourself in the podcast, that'd be great.
Sure. Ricky, you want to go first? Or you want me to go ahead? Yeah, sure. I'll start off, and then we'll kind of bring you in. So the Carolina Weather Group was kind of just a spur of the moment idea that really launched out of some big weather events that we were having in our area. Many of us were friends with Brad Panovich and Tim Buckley and a few other folks in the Carolina media group. And so when we got these big weather events, we were doing these Google Plus video hangouts because Scotty Powell and a few other members are part of the Foothills Weather Network, which is a group of meteorologists who serve Western North Carolina through Facebook, Twitter, social media, and their website. And so when they got the idea to kind of bring this whole weather podcast, weather hangout talk show together, it spurred from there. Now I think we're up to like 151 episodes, if Scotty's numbers were correct that he pulled up. So we are a weekly weather podcast / Google Plus video hangout. You can watch live on YouTube if you'd like to. Every Wednesday night at around 8 o'clock Eastern. We typically go for about an hour or so. And despite our name being Carolina Weather Group, we do branch out to many other areas of weather. We just had a show on lightning safety and lightning last night. We talked to Ryan Hickman from Owls and House a few weeks ago. We had Bill Murray on a few weeks ago. And we've got a couple more exciting episodes coming up in the next couple of weeks. So eventually, as our podcast grew, we brought Shay on, and Shay is down in the Charleston, South Carolina area.
Thanks, Ricky. Appreciate it. And thanks a lot for having me on the show tonight. Yeah, I'm sort of like Bill Murray. You know, I got the bug when I was a kid. My father was a meteorologist in the Air Force. He taught me a lot about meteorology and weather, and I did a lot of science projects growing up. And it was sort of like one of those hobbies that I never really wanted to put to work. Kind of like you have a passion for playing guitar or something, and you don't want to go into a band. But I kept it close to the chest for many years. I went into the food and beverage industry, was general manager of a few restaurants, and I kept it going. I started getting into kiteboarding in 2009, and the local community couldn't really translate what the winds were doing. So I jumped in and started a Facebook group and started helping people out and understand winds for the Charleston area and the sea breezes, and that sort of grew and grew. I got scouted by WeatherFlow, and they brought me on in 2012 to lead the Southeast region for the wind forecasting. That sort of grew, do the East Coast as well and tropics. And it's been a real treat to join a great company such as WeatherFlow and grow with them and learn a lot from their team and all the other meteorologists as well. We have all kinds of things going on with WeatherFlow. We have personal weather stations and modeling and wind forecasts and you name it. It's great to be with them. But Ricky, you're right. I mean, I came on last year with Carolina Weather Group, and it's been great to meet a lot of really fascinating individuals, brilliant people out there, such as everyone on this show tonight. And it's been a real treat. So glad to be here.
And so I think the most unique and eccentric weather podcast is Ice Station Houseman, especially the name. I got to be honest. I was reading your site and I didn't realize that was the reason you named yourselves that. So I guess tell us why you named yourselves that, and then everything else about your podcast.
The name comes about, and hi, I'm Bill Houseman, one of the three hosts of Ice Station Houseman. The name comes about because of just a joke that ran on Twitter for many years. My wife calls our house Ice Station Houseman because I always keep it very cold, and that's it. There's not. It's not very funny. It was just a joke that me and a bunch of people went on Twitter for years, and when we were trying to come up with a name, we couldn't come up with a better name, so we just stuck with that. My other hosts of the show are Jimmy Marks, who recently, up until last week, worked for Science Magazine, and now just started a new job, and I actually don't remember the name of his new company. I'll have to get that again from him. And Becky Elliott, who works for AccuWeather, who's an actual meteorologist. Jimmy and I are not meteorologists. Jimmy and I are both software developers. We just like weather. And our show covers all sorts of topics. We don't really, we kind of discuss current weather a little bit on each show. But we've also, our most recent episode, we discussed ocean currents and how they affect weather. We've done shows before on El Nino, on La Nina. I mean, we've covered all sorts of topics. We even had a show that just covered every possible type of precipitation. So it's just kind of random. So our shows vary in length from as short as 45 minutes to sometimes an hour and a half. We've had most of the time it's just me, Jimmy, and Becky. but sometimes we have guests on the show. We've had in Livingston from Capital Weather Gang and U.S. Tornadoes. We've had Katie Wheatley on to talk about GIS mapping for what she does for U.S. Tornadoes, mapping out where the actual storms, the tracks of them are for their site. We've had Becky's fiance on to talk about how AccuWeather was working with getting the GOES 16 satellite data down, and we did a show about GOES 16. So we just like weather. We talk about whatever random topic we choose to talk about each episode, unless there's some big weather event happening, like we did her whole show dedicated to Matthew when Matthew hit, because it was such a significant event.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, I think most of our viewers should be familiar with Becky because she's collaborated with us with the Weather Ready or Not series of podcast, which is more of a produced series. But thank you all. That was a great intro. We're waiting on Kim Cunningham from Stormfront Freaks. A little bit of a technical issue there, so hopefully we can work that out. And when she comes on, we'll go ahead and give her the intro. But let's jump into our Trending in the Weatherverse segment here. Guys, feel free to chime in whenever you want. I have 4 tweets, mainly on the snowstorm. So it's a little heavy because I'm biased. I'm a snow weenie, I guess you could call me, growing up in the Northeast or Mid-Atlantic. But let's get to the first one here. The first one is from our very own Tyler Jankowski. He's real busy today and yesterday and the day before that because he actually is forecasting and broadcasting in an area that was basically the jackpot for this storm. At Burlington, they got 30.4 inches. And says in his tweet, this week's snowstorm officially the second largest on record in Burlington with 30.4.
Wow.
The largest snowstorm was 33.1 back in 2010. So yeah, Tyler was, I don't know if you all saw any of his video, but it was pretty, or anyone's video from Monday, Tuesday, I guess. Pretty crazy. I know, Joel, you were in the rain snow line area.
Yeah,
tell us about that.
So I live in the Washington D.C. area in Northern Virginia, about 40 miles west of D.C. In Fauquier County, and we were forecasted to be sufficiently west that it was supposed to be an all snow event, except for just a few hours in the middle of the night that they thought it would do a changeover and mix for a bit and then switch back over to snow as the end wrapped around. But it turned out to be warmer aloft than they thought, and it was an almost all sleet event for us. It started out briefly as snow, changed over to sleet within an hour or so, sleeted all night. Heavy wind, so much so that like the sleet hitting the windows of my house on both the first and second floor was so loud, it kept my wife and our 8-month-old baby awake several times during the middle of the night. It was loud. And then I think early the next morning, it must have changed back over to snow very briefly at my house because there was a little layer of powder on the top. But it was mostly all sleet. Yeah, we were supposed to have, 5 or 6 inches of snow probably with upwards of 10 or 12, and it was 2.5 inches of just solid sleet. And I know that we have a friend of the show, Katie Wheatley, up in Maryland. I think she experienced mostly the same thing, and then you had to get on up into like New York and Pennsylvania before you really hit the good snow.
Yeah. Yeah, it was quite the gradient, right, I guess, west of 95, northwest of 95.
Yeah.
But in a similar vein, I really want to know everyone's opinion on this next tweet from Good Morning America.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
I haven't even seen it yet, but
it caused a little bit of a tussle on Twitter. But their tweet says, reminder in all caps, shouting almost. Using a name for a winter storm is incorrect. The National Weather Service does not name winter storms. #Blizzard 2017. And that is shade at the Weather Channel who named this storm Stella. So what do you all think about this?
I think you got to look at who tweeted that. Good Morning America being ABC and the Weather Channel being owned by NBC. Two competing companies there. And I can kind of see their reasoning behind it. I used to be totally against the idea, but after hearing some of Aries, I'm going to screw up his last name. Ari S, the guy from the Weather Channel. His last name. There you go. Thanks, Bill. You're gonna give me crap for that one. After hearing his point of view, all these companies like ABC, like CBS, what are they searching for on Twitter to find pictures of this storm? They're not searching Blizzard 2017. They're searching Winter Storm Stella, because that's what people are actually tweeting. So from a social media standpoint, it's perfect advertising. And even if the Weather Channel, doesn't really get into it in terms of how they name the winter storms, and we can fight about that till the day we die, it's great marketing.
I have to agree with Ricky. I used to be sort of against the idea, because really it should be the authorities who are naming systems, and they're typically limited to tropical, but they do it over in Europe. The thing is, it's really touchy subject. Ricky's exactly right. It's advertisement, and it's also something that John Q. Public can latch on to in a hashtag or some information. If they want to look up the information on this storm very quickly, they don't have to go dig into someone's weather blog, or they don't have to go to the Weather Service and try to navigate those pages. They can just get on Twitter and hit hashtag Stella, and they can find information about the storm right away, and current information at that. So that's one good, decent aspect to it, I would think.
I think, unfortunately, we're in the day and age where people are just going to lump all the forecasts together as one. When you ask someone about a weather forecast, they don't say the Weather Channel got it wrong. They say they got it wrong, and lumping all the forecasters together, which bugs us. But think about it from a public standpoint. For some person who really doesn't care too much about weather, they're probably just lumping them all together, just like you would any politician. Probably not every politician's voting the same way or has the same thoughts, but they kind of tote the party line. And that's what I think people do sometimes with the party of meteorologists.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think when they first proposed, how long ago was this going on? This is like 2 years now, 3 years that they started the naming scheme.
I think it's 3 or 4.
Three.
Jeez,
Okay.
I thought it was like 5 years.
When I first heard about it, I was like, oh no, it's not NWS naming it. So who are they to say it's a name? But on the other hand, after I've gotten used to it a bit, it's like, it's not a big of a crime as some people make it out to be. And there's just so many useful aspects to it. It's like, why not? If NWS isn't, at least Weather Channel is stepping up to do it. I don't know. Maybe I don't know what the legal implications of NWS actually working with them to come up with a naming system together or something. Who knows? That's not my department. But I like everything that you guys have said so far. I don't see anything bad about it. It's only positives.
Well, when you get systems like the one we just had, namely Stella, that was one of my Twitter feeds that I had, one of the Twitter tweets that I put out there. And it showed that the winds, in particular in Wellfleet, Massachusetts, on the Outer Capes, it's oceanside, the winds got up to 79 miles per hour. It was the highest gust that we got in our WeatherFlow Mesonet. We have a pretty good array set up along the coastal United States, especially up in that area. We have lots of weather stations up there, and they're firmly placed in open spots, maritime, with good maritime feed. And when you have something like that, 20 feet above ground level. And at that spot, I think it's 88 above sea level, but it's where the homes are. It's where people are. 79 miles an hour in gusts, and the wind speeds were actually close to it. They were about 67 miles an hour as an average for a small period. I mean, the winds built all the way up to that, and then they slowly faded. But when you get winds that high, you almost got to think, does this merit a name, even though it is a winter storm? So the pressure also dropped to 50 millibars within an 18-hour period. So that's also significant as well.
Yeah. I noticed you didn't do hashtag Stella. Was that on purpose or just didn't do it?
Kind of both. I mean, I'm not sure if WeatherFlow is in the business of naming storm, going along with the name storm yet. So I have to kind of respect that boundary. Gotcha. We've talked about it. We've talked about whether or not we're going to, but I haven't gotten a firm answer on it. So I just choose to stay straight, keep a straight ticket on that.
Yeah. So I I actually have nothing to add to that. I pretty much echo everything you all said. So we'll move on here to our next tweet from Nick Webb. He's a National Weather Service meteorologist. You can follow him at StormChase4. There's no E in Chase, just CHAS. His tweet says, "We, as National Weather Service meteorologists, current and retired, must be able to accept criticism better instead of lashing out on personal social media." Panel, your thoughts?
I think I saw this tweet what it was referenced to, or at least I saw one like it on Twitter this week in this discussion.
Yeah, I actually don't know what it's referencing to.
If it's the one I'm thinking about, and it may not, but I don't think it's that big of a deal that it may not be the same tweet because it's certainly like it. Someone was super critical, a forecaster that worked for some weather organization who writes a forecast blog, I would say, on their website. And I'm not familiar with the guy's tweet that I saw or who he was or who he worked for, but he explained it in a series of tweets, the difference. And some random member of the public responded to him on Twitter saying, it was very mean-spirited the way the tweet was written. Like, yeah, you wrote this one thing, but your app says this. And the guy basically took great offense to this and said, look, I'm not responsible for the app, and this is like an app on an iPhone or an Android. I'm not responsible for the app or how that data gets into it or where the data comes from. I write this forecast blog over here. Why are you being so mean to me? And then said some kind of critical things back toward him. And I think, I don't know if it was that tweet or a different tweet, but it was along a big discussion of a lot of people in the weather community saying, should we be so hostile back towards the public when they lash out because of forecast bust, or do we need to have a thicker skin and just take it in the chin and be a little more polite about it?
Well, I think the one you're talking about, Joel, was James Spann, our partner and host on Weather Brains.
That may be who it was. Yeah.
The trolls get under his skin sometimes, and he does come back at him quite frequently. And there's an army of people in Alabama that support James. When we get these people, that one got a little testy, and I think both parties realized they needed to back off a little bit. And James even kind of said that when he ended the conversation.
Given what I saw, though, I don't think it was unwarranted.
Yeah,
I would have probably done the same thing.
Not the first time that person has ever kind of come after those forecasts.
Right. Yeah. Trolls will be trolls.
And that's usually the case. I mean, when we get forecast bust in my area, I'm in the Tri-Cities television market, and we've got a few select people who will always comment whenever something goes wrong or just whenever they want to comment about the forecast. And I have the policy of I don't block them unless they start getting really vulgar to me or really obscene. I let them comment whatever they want, because most of the time I've found that a lot of my trolls or haters in the past can be converted. And I have some of my best people now, my best followers from those quote unquote trolls.
Yeah. And we just switched formats on our blog from a straight chronological blog, which it had always been. And that's what everybody wanted. But we needed to move for a major content sponsor that we were dealing with. They were insisting that we go to a magazine format, and it looked better anyway. But people were used to the old format. And so we kind of conditioned them this was coming. And, I was sort of defensive, in those first few weeks, like, how dare they question this move to the magazine format, and I would get ready to fire off, some, response on Facebook or Twitter or, directly on the blog, whatever. But, I stopped on, this really first serious one, and I thought, the guy's got a point. And, I listened to what he had to say, and I thought about it, and, it made me change some things on the format of the blog. So it made me innovate a couple of things that met his needs, probably met the needs of a lot of other people. And, now he's a big supporter. He liked it. And, it's no different than any other business. If somebody tells you that what you're doing doesn't work, you need to listen to them. So I learned that, really close up and personally. And luckily, before I fired off any ugly tweets, I thought a couple of the interesting ones that happened this week were Gary Satkowski coming back at some folks up there in his market. Now he's retired, he can say whatever he wants. And I think there was a case maybe with the Fort Worth office a few weeks ago firing back at someone for, making a few points. I don't know if y'all saw that little exchange, but it was very pointed from the Weather Service. You have to be careful, when you're wearing that official uniform. I know today someone tweeted at me, why don't you do something about this CBS headline out there that says, the National Weather Service basically was lying to us. And, it was pointed to me and to the National Weather Association. Of course, now I've got to wear that NWA hat. Right. And of course, immediately the comms group started working on it. So I have an official statement I can read from the NWA about our opinion on it. Yeah. But that formed from a lot of people on the council's input. And this is going to be a very interesting case for for the next few weeks for certain. What happened this week with the Weather Service and what Greg Carbon had to say afterwards.
Yeah. So just kind of coming back to the original tweet, I have never been an operational or on-air meteorologist, so I've never really dealt with any of that heat because I know that's what triggers it. It's like almost like a coping mechanism in a way. Dealing with all that criticism can just get to you sometimes, and sometimes it's warranted, sometimes it's not. So I don't know. I feel like you all probably, especially Ricky, had a good approach to that because you've dealt with that firsthand.
Sarcasm has become my best friend.
Yeah.
It is very hard for me not to reply to some things, but I always try to be nice and sincere about it. But sarcasm has become my best friend. So.
Yeah. Yeah. And then one thing that just came to mind is weather people have it kind of rough when it comes to a busted forecast, but climate people who are very active on Twitter or social media or any sort of site, oh my gosh, I've scrolled some of those comment sections, and it's probably 10 times worse than what meteorologists get because it's so much more divisive and political.
And they get it on a daily basis. We only get it when the forecast busts.
Yeah.
Well, and I think there's some crossover now where the meteorologists are getting caught in the crossfire because we've always basically had a don't discuss climate policy on Weather Brains. Because it just leads to all sorts of polarization. And I saw some things the last couple of days that really concerned me because there were elements that were attacking the Weather Enterprise, saying basically that we are lying to the public on purpose. And one of the reasons that I came across and it concerned me greatly was that these people believe that an agenda is being fostered by the National Weather Service, by NOAA, by the Weather Enterprise, to lie and hype storms to make climate change more of a bigger issue. So that's
scary.
A real concern to me along the way is that the broadcast meteorologists are sort of the station scientists. That's what a lot of these groups tell tell TV station meteorologists, you're the local scientists, so you need to be out front on this issue. And I really fear if we're totally caught in that crossfire, our credibility is going to be, hit sometimes. These tweets I saw this last couple of days really scare me about calling us liars, because nobody is lying. We're going to go back and analyze this event that happened in the Mid-Atlantic and the Northeast, and we'll sit down and get some real analysis of what went wrong and what went right. And, hopefully some good things will come out of it. But I don't think anybody was lying to the public in the Northeast or the Mid-Atlantic. I think they were obviously trying to keep their best interest. I think we have to be very careful as forecasters that we stick to forecasting the weather and not necessarily second guessing everyone's, activities and intentions, and let them make decisions for themselves. Maybe that's one of the lessons we'll walk away from this, in learning, because I don't want us to lose credibility over situations like this.
Right, Bill, and that's a good point. There was also another time this past hurricane season, Tropical Storm Julia that formed over Florida, that I saw some pretty ugly tweets out there and some really negative comments that they were trying to. They went ahead and named the storm because they wanted to go ahead and get another name in the book to get their numbers. And you're just thinking, wow, I mean, they have.
Is there some kind of hurricane quota that I don't know about?
Well, I mean, they want to, hit their numbers and make sure that they're, and we all know that they waited they waited and waited and waited to name storms. I mean, how many invests do we have to wait for? You know? They were not in the business of giving a name to a storm very quickly. I'll guarantee you that.
What the public isn't aware is that if we get up to X amount of named storms, they get a bonus every year.
Yeah,
It's like a football player in the
Out of
NFL.
context right there.
That's right. Yeah.
This really concerns me now that we're at this position where we're talking about funding for the National Weather Service, because I don't know if y'all saw, but the NOAA budget is cut by 16% under President Trump's proposed budget. I don't know, that may be less toward the Weather Service, more toward oceans. I don't know what the breakdown is, but you saw some things yesterday, like cut their funding. Well, there are now people in Washington that might listen to that, and that really concerns me, because I think. Maybe our National Weather Service isn't perfect, but I think those men and women are doing a fantastic job trying to protect the public in the United States, and I don't want to see it dismantled or changed in any way. They're already operating on a shoestring budget at these offices.
It always seems like it's also a darned if you do, darned if you don't. Like if they really hedged their bets and said, well, it could be a bust or it could be that, then they'll get blamed if it's a blizzard. And then if it busts, they get blamed because they overhyped it. Like, it always seems like someone's going to be angry one way or the other, no matter what they do.
Yeah. I feel like almost in the Northeast, though, they are much better prepared to handle a forecast that busts, quote unquote, with more snow than they are with less snow, because they're used to it. They do this stuff, yearly. So for them, perhaps it's not as big of a deal if they get 8 inches of snow when they're forecasting 2 inches of snow. The big issue is when they shut down the schools, shut down New York City public schools, and disrupt the subway service like they've done with some previous storms, and then it ended up not being a big deal. So it's really just a combination of, what was it, 1 or 2 years ago they had that big forecast bust where there wasn't a whole lot of snow. I think people are just going back to that memory again.
Yeah, Ricky, you hit the nail on the head. The key word there is disruption. When you have a huge disruption and inconvenience to people's lives, they're going to pay attention more. What is the saying that you can get 100 forecasts right and no one will ever remember? You get one wrong, everybody remembers. So that sort of falls hand in hand with that. And I think they were right to hold that forecast no matter what, because at this point, even with all the dynamics going on with the storm, you've got to keep that threat that the weather itself can take lives. And I think it did. Didn't it claim 16 lives? It may have been further inland, but it was a deadly storm in the end.
I remember seeing an article that it was at least 4 or 5, but that was like halfway before the storm was done with. So, I know it did some.
Well, you just go back and ask James Spann about 2014. Here's a guy who probably had more emotional capital in a market than anybody else in the country, especially after the April 2011 tornadoes. And that forecast was busted just because, we don't have enough experience in Alabama forecasting, what the roads are going to be like. And nobody really thought about the fact that it was 16 degrees and that the initial snow was going to melt and then immediately refreeze in the cold temperatures. And we had a humanitarian disaster. And, you've never seen people turn on anybody any faster than they did that day. And James headed it off beautifully by, going on the air around 2:30 and apologizing. And, that was the right thing to do, with a lot of humility, because it was a blown forecast. And about 50,000 people spent the night on the interstate in Birmingham because of it. So, we still have a lot to learn in this industry. We're not perfect. We're not always right. And, we're going to make mistakes. And unfortunately, we get cut less and less slack as we go through time.
We had one like that in the DC area here back in 2000, I believe it was either 7 or 8. And I specifically remember because it was on the day of the Virginia primary during the election between Barack Obama and McCain. And it was primary day in Virginia. And, everyone was either getting off work early to go vote or stuff like that. And it was one of these things where it was forecasted to be a cold rain, and it ended up dropping about 2 degrees from 34 down to 31, 3 degrees about an hour before rush hour was supposed to start. And everyone had already started to leave work early to go home and early and vote. And the storm was coming in. And here in the DC area around the Beltway, we have a lot of raised overpasses, concrete with air flowing under them. And the roads were already bumper to bumper traffic. And then everything froze, and none of the roads had been treated. And I had many coworkers that left work at like 3:30 or 4 p.m. that didn't get home till midnight that night. Nice. And spent like that. It took them heard stories of 5 hours to go 4 miles down a road. Just atrocious traffic.
I think if there's one, one thing we've learned from all these things though is that there are numerous opportunities to learn from all these mistakes. I mean, with the Alabama situation, Bill, I can tell you I've gone back now and looked at temperature differently when it comes to snow. And when it starts falling at 17 degrees like it did yesterday morning here, I was looking a little different at the forecast than I would have at 31, 32, 33, especially after it kind of being some rain the previous day. So there's something we'll learn from all these misses or busted forecasts. But hey, there was a 5.5 inch per hour snow rate in I think it was Pennsylvania or something, or Western New Jersey. Didn't bust there for sure.
No.
Wow.
What did y'all think about Governor Chris Christie's comments?
So great segue here. I'm going to play his audio. Friend of the show, Jacob DeFlitch, shared a tweet that said remarks from Governor Chris Christie are incredibly frustrating to say the least. And let's go to that audio now.
A pollster called me today and tell me that being a weatherman, if you compare that to being a pollster, it would be like a pollster saying to me the night before an election, Governor, you could get 60% tomorrow night or 35% or someplace in between. And then they still get paid. I wouldn't pay a pollster for that kind of prediction. I don't know about how well we should be paying these weather guys. I've had my fill after 7.5 years in the National Weather Service, to tell you the truth.
Yikes.
Let's just preface that by asking you, who's the current president of the United States and who is expected to be president of the United States?
So my snarky remark was, if only meteorologists could be as successful as Christie's presidential run. Yeah, because I mean, come on now. It's just obvious that he doesn't really know what he's talking about. I think that's kind of the basis of it.
All politicians want is someone to blame, and that's a
good point. Yeah.
Well, he comes from a long line of them. I mean, the governor of Georgia, there's a bunch of them that are lined up in that same bent of, criticizing the weather forecasters when it happens. And, we have to take it when it comes, I guess. But in this environment, I think it's a little more dangerous.
Yeah.
I made the comment, I forget if I may have been on the show you were on, but no, it was with Ryan Hickman. The thing is, we haven't had any big weather events in the past 2 or 3 years to get more funding from. The last major weather event we had that I think funding really got kicked in from was Hurricane Sandy. What major weather event since then has really sparked a large political, rising in terms of money towards weather funding?
Yeah, you'd think the forecast bust that we have would trigger the thoughts of, hey, maybe we should improve forecasting rather than, hey, we should cut their funding because they're bad. Like
it's always so short-sighted and vindictive. Cut their funding because they're bad. So what's gonna then happen 5 to 10 years from now when there's no one left to do the job? You're just gonna walk outside and guess at what the weather's gonna be.
It'll be privatized like the air traffic control system.
We need to have the president see how the European model runs, and then he'll just want to make ours better.
Ah, there you go. It'll be huge.
Tremendous. Ricky, I think you had a tweet to share that was non-nor'easter. I think we kind of beat the horse there. So if you want to...
Yeah, not so controversial, but I thought this was really, really cool. Nick Stewart, who works at KHQA, I believe that's in, where is that station? Texas somewhere? All right. Nope, I'm wrong. Quincy, Illinois. He tweeted out earlier today that the rocket that was launched by SpaceX, a Falcon 9 rocket, was bright enough to be picked up on one of Ghost 16's bands. It was picked up on the visible band, 0.64. through the overnight. I imagine the infrared probably picked it up too. Yeah, it did. His previous tweet shows that too. It was picked up on the infrared image as well, and he tweeted out a few images from that. But that just shows you kind of the neat stuff that's going to be coming with the GOES 16, GOES R, and really it should serve as a reminder that if you haven't dove into what GOES 16 offers, now is the opportunity to do that and learn a little bit about these bands. There's a great ABI kind of cheat sheet that they have online, and I've been looking at that and kind of using it while looking at some of the SIMS data, and I've learned more from that in the past 2 weeks just looking at real-time data and the different bands that I have in my entire time using visible satellite data.
I just want to point out one of the co-hosts of my podcast, Ice Station Houseman, Jimmy, has named Gozar Gozer, as in the alien from Ghostbusters.
And really, we're not that far away from GOES S, GOES T, and GOES U launch. And GOES S and T are slated, I think GOES S is slated for later this year, and then GOES T is slated for first 2018.
Yeah, actually was lucky enough to visit the Lockheed facility just south of Denver, where they actually build the satellites. And GOES S is built, and they're just going through testing now. And my goodness, is that thing beautiful. I had to get in like a bunny suit and everything, and I have really long hair, so I had to like pin back my hair and everything, and got to look at it, and it was just in awe the entire time. They actually were doing a shake test where they put it on this huge piece of equipment and they shake it a lot to resemble the liftoff, I guess, kind of disruptions that happen. I think everything is going well, and they're already building what is it? QRST?
T, yeah.
T, yeah, alphabet. But it looks like we are just joined here by Kim. Kim, can you hear us?
Hey, you guys, I can. I'm so sorry. I've been going crazy. I had my husband down here trying to help me out, and I finally got onto my iPad, the laptop, some proxy issues. I'll tell you that later. But
that's interesting. Well, I'm glad to have you on now. Give us a little intro about you and Stormfront Freaks and where we can listen to you all.
Oh, okay. Stormfrontfreaks.com is a great website for us, and we're on every other Thursday. So we will have another, we show it raw as well. Like you can actually see us on next Thursday, but then the podcast is usually a couple days after that, after they can edit it. So we've got a great group. We've got, some people who are with degrees, and some people who like Phil, who are just weather geeks and just love weather and just really enjoying the time. So it's a lot of fun. We do a lot of bring guests on as well, and we love to hear how people get started in weather, just like you guys do. And we usually have somebody show somebody doing something stupid out in the weather that we can talk about.
Weather Fools, I love that.
Weather Fools, yeah, that's a great one. And we play games with the person we're interviewing and something that they're knowledgeable about. And it's a lot of fun, very relaxed atmosphere. And we also share websites that we think are really cool that helped us all these years of forecasting weather, or just something we think is a really good website that could help somebody else. So that's basically what we do. So next Thursday we'll be on. I think it's another great podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. I was on the show last week with Reed Timmer, and that was a really, really fun time. So check out that episode if you haven't yet. Reed Timmer, we got into some bug trivia, insect trivia, which I was not expecting.
I know, that was good.
Yeah.
I mean, but he's out in the elements all the time. Why wouldn't he like insects? I guess, I don't know. Kind of crazy.
Yeah, I never knew that about him. He's an insect guy.
Yeah, he's an interesting fellow, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, It was fun to have his mom there with them.
I know.
That was funny. Someone asked, "Why did you let your son chase?" or something like that, and I think she responded like, "I had no choice. He just left," or something.
That's right. Sometimes that's how it is. And Brady, one of our co-hosts on Stormfront Freaks, I think his parents are nervous about him doing that. So that's why he was kind of asking, saying, "How did you get your mom to let you do that?" I think he was trying to get the scoop on that. But there just comes a time, when I was in the Air Force, I was on my own out in Nebraska. I was stationed out there for 3 years, and I did some chasing. I did some by myself, but that was back in the 80s where you just didn't have the tools that we have today. And I know my mom was always really nervous about it, but times. But
So Kim, just to fill you in, we have been talking mainly about the snowstorm earlier this week. Yeah, and all the chatter surrounding that. Something I'm curious to hear your opinion of. We'll go back to it real quick here. Is I don't know if you saw Good Morning America throw some shade at the Weather Channel naming storms.
No, I did not. But that seemed, there's still some people have come around to using the names, I've noticed, but there's still some that don't think it's the right thing to do. And I don't know. I don't know. People think they do it just for hype. When I was at the Weather Channel, it's something we fought about all the time with people that thought, it's silly. Why are you doing this? You're only doing it to, to hype it, basically. Start getting those views and those clicks, way before it happens. But, but research has shown that people, the name, it's like a hurricane, the name sticks with them, and there's something about identifying it and having putting a name to it that people remember things more. So. But I didn't see it. So what happened? What'd they do?
They basically just said it's incorrect to name winter storms because the National Weather Service doesn't name winter storms. And the consensus on the panel here tonight was that we were all kind of hesitant to go with naming winter storms at the beginning, but now it seems like the right way to go just because people search for the hashtag and can remember it more easily.
And that was the goal, I think, when Tom Nizzle, when they were developing this, was they really thought it would save lives more than anything. Because of that, people get information easier by the hashtags, and he knew back then that it would take a while to really, for people to get used to it and sign on to it. And I think they've tried to work with the National Weather Service, see if maybe they can be a partnership and all that. But I don't think that worked out, obviously. But it's hard when you're going with government versus public. Like, I don't know. It's always been an issue.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that they brought that up and said that they shouldn't be doing it. But that won't change things, I'm sure.
Yeah, probably not.
Probably not.
Yeah. So did anyone else have any other tweets or anything to share, any stories from this week in weather, or because I went through all mine, but I don't know if
I had a random topic that I wanted to bring up. I found it interesting. I've known they've done this for a while, but I believe the hurricane hunters went out and did a drop-us-on route through right off the coast of the United States, the eastern United States, before this winter storm formed, to get a little bit of upper air sounding data. Which makes you wonder, we have so many systems that come in from the Pacific Northwest. Why don't we ever try and do the same thing up there?
That's a great point.
Right.
So sample it earlier.
My assumption is that it goes over the upper air sounding systems, and they think, a day or two is good enough lead time. But, we get into these long range weather forecasts, 3, 4, 5 days, and we saw a system here dramatically shift from kind of the northeast to then my area, and then further south once we got about a day or so out in the runs of the models because of better upper air soundings.
Yeah, I'm on the East Coast, so I don't pay a ton of attention to systems immediately hitting the West Coast until it makes its way across the continent to where I'm at. But I wasn't aware that we didn't already do that. I kind of assumed that we would periodically, for larger storms, send something the equivalent of the hurricane hunters, if not them, over into them and do soundings. But yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Right. I feel like they have done it before, but I can't remember when or the case that they did it, but I feel like they have done this before. But I totally agree. There needs to be more data out there, because that's what, drives our forecasts, several days out, and you need to know that. And it changes so much between, day 3 to day 5 that it would really be very helpful. And you just wonder, with all the cuts coming, who knows what's gonna if they'll even be able to do something like that. But Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say on the bright side, it might get easier if the money's there, to sample some of these storms with UAV and drone technology getting cheaper and getting more advanced. I know the National Weather Service, they want to automate all of their sound or balloon launches, and maybe not have balloon launches, maybe just send something that gets the, I don't know, the lower part of the troposphere more frequently, and do it automatically via drone or something. I've talked to a few National Weather Service people that say that's where they're going. So maybe they could apply something like that to storms off the coast.
I have a friend
That's
who
a great idea.
worked with laser-based soundings at one time. And that to me is a really ambitious way for us to get more data, especially in the lowest 1,000 feet. Instead of having to launch a balloon, we just use a laser beam and different technology that's going to come in the next couple of years or several years to get more and more sounding data. I think, honestly, that is where we still lack in terms of our weather observations. I don't know, Bill or Kim or anyone, do you know when the last time we expanded the radiosonde or balloon launch system was?
Oh gosh.
I imagine it's been pretty constant for a long time. Maybe
Yeah.
stations have moved around, but I think we have, is it 92 over the Pacific Islands in the United States and 1,300 around the world? And I know that because we're doing a 6th grade balloon launch at our kids' school next week. So we're teaching them about it. It's the second year we've done it. It was a huge success last year. We had 6-second data to 106,000 feet and a GoPro camera all the way up and down.
Nice.
And retrieved it. And it was such a huge science learning experience for those guys. So we've got a really cool workbook. And I really would encourage, you to encourage the teachers in your market to, get into that sort of idea, because, we're teaching them about vorticity, we're teaching them about humidity and, condensation and, just all kinds of weather concepts, because we're turning 450 kids into launch weather officers for next week. And they're going to pick the launch day because that launch day is very important to recovering the payload and getting data back that you can use. It's going to be very fun. So it's a great science learning experiment. So maybe when it all goes away and they're all getting the soundings from planes, we'll still launch them from schools and have fun.
Yeah.
We launched a weather balloon one day as part of NBC Charlotte's spotter group, and it was going up, and then it hit that jet stream, and boy, that thing took off.
That is too cool.
That's the first parameter the kids are looking for, those 300 millibar winds.
Yeah, we thought we had sampled it, but it was a lot stronger than we thought. Well, making a long story short, it starts to descend right over Fort Bragg.
Oh gosh.
Luckily, it did not go inside the base, but we had to call them and be like, "Hey guys, there's going to be something floating down into your base. Please don't shoot it. It's got a camera on it." It landed actually in a hunting reserve, and then it took them like 2 weeks to find it. They launched a helicopter and fly over it.
Wow.
Eventually, they found that it's like finding a needle in a haystack almost with these weather balloons.
Yeah, the teacher she's even gone to the point where she's got multiple chase teams going after the payload this year. And she even said, look, if you've got a jet stream, a jet ski in Roanoke on the lake there, we may need you to go out and fish the payload out of the lake. So.
We have these really awesome middle schoolers in my area, and these kids are so smart. They work with the robotics program here in Bristol, and I did a live shot with them one morning, and we were just talking about stuff, and I'm somewhat sciencey, and I had no idea what they were talking about. But they launched these balloons, and they use cell phones and like 3 other methods of triangulating them, and they recover almost every single one now off of their methods. So
nice.
Did you see where the high school robotics team in Florida actually worked with the Weather Service to automate the release of the balloon in a lightning situation because it was dangerous to go out and do it?
NASA does that.
That's awesome.
Maybe that was a cool story, because these robotics teams are really cool. These kids are amazing.
Yeah, NASA does that. I learned when I was down at Goes R that they have this little teeny robot that a high school group developed, and they drive it on out there and release the balloons, because a lot of times they'll need these upper air soundings. Storms are moving in right before launch, and they have certain lightning criteria that they can't put them out there, but they have to have these balloons, otherwise they can't launch the rockets. So
Yeah,
that's a cool story.
the field storm field studies could really use that. I've seen videos of, especially it was Pecan, I guess 2 years ago, where they were launching balloons into these nighttime thunderstorms, and it was terrifying to watch. I'm kind of a sissy, and I'm terrified of lightning, so I could never do that. And that sounds, I mean, it's probably too expensive for their their budget, but that would be really cool if they could use that. While they're chasing.
Mm-hmm.
What was it? I think it was in the Great Plains. I love hearing stories about where the radio sondes end up. Wasn't it? I actually forget which forecasting office it was, but didn't a radio sonde land at a WFO from another WFO? Do you guys remember seeing that?
I want to say it was Norman to Kansas City, maybe.
Yeah, that sounds
That's
right.
really neat. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's wild. I've always wanted to stumble upon one on hikes, because I know every now and then they'll actually go west up into the mountains from the Boulder WFO, depending on what kind of setup we have here. And I don't know, that would just be a cool story to have there.
The last one I heard about here in the DC area, I believe it was last year or maybe the year before, NWS Sterling launched their normal, I don't know if they do them daily or weekly or how often they do them, but they did one, and it landed somewhere in downtown Baltimore, and police spotted it as like an unattended package and called in the SWAT team with the bomb robot and all, because they didn't know what it was. And it made the local news. Like, NWS Sterling's like, can we have that back if you didn't blow it up, please?
Pilot who was flying, I think this was maybe 3 or so weeks ago, I saw the tweet about it, but they spotted the balloon at altitude while they were flying their airliner.
Oh, wow.
So that makes
like a commercial plane?
Yeah, like a commercial airliner. It was a PIREP someone put in.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, one of the things we had to do right before the launch was, we of course notified the FAA, and they, a day or two in advance, like they said, and they said, we want you to contact the Birmingham, or actually the Birmingham Tower called us and said, let us know when you're going to release, and we're going to hold all the traffic. And so we did, like they said, 5 minutes before the launch, and they held it while it was in the airspace over Birmingham. And, once it crossed over, got up to, around 15,000 feet east of the city, they went back and released all the airplanes. So.
Wow. I didn't realize that. Does that type of coordination happen during all the balloon launches? Do you know?
I think most of our weather offices are probably not in Class B airspace, though. We actually we launched in Class B airspace, and because of where the school was.
Gotcha.
I'd be interested to know if Sterling has to deal with any of that up here in DC area, because they're not that far from Dulles. But when you go more towards the city, there's all sorts of airspace restrictions up here.
Yeah.
Hey, I have a question for you guys about balloon launches, because I wasn't National Weather Service, or didn't know much about the balloon launches themselves. I've never seen one. But how do they are they able to do one anytime they want, an additional one besides the normal launches? If they have to do a special launch, do they have to have certain criteria to do that, or can they just go out and do one?
I think they probably have to have approval from the region. Would be my bet. I don't know. That'd be a good question to ask. I think we're gonna have Gary Satkowski on Monday night. I'm having breakfast with Jim Stefkovich tomorrow, so I'll ask him that question.
Right.
And Kim, we're gonna have you on at the end of the month, so I'm
That's
excited about
right.
you being on Weather Brains, our podcast.
And hopefully, I'll be able to be on the whole time instead of just last 10 minutes. But
well, that's our marathon episode. We're going till midnight that night.
Is that right?
Come with your toothbrush. Be ready to spend the night.
I know.
So yeah, we can. Sorry, go ahead, Kim.
Ready. I'll be ready.
So we can wrap up the show here in typical
We're having so much fun.
Yeah, I know. Well, we could keep going. I usually stop it at an hour just to respect everyone's schedules, and I know some of us have children here, babies to deal with. But so we always end the show asking our guest, what advice would you give to an up-and-coming meteorologist or someone in earth science, or someone in college or high school? So we'll start with Bill. What kind of advice would you give to an up-and-coming meteorologist?
Be entrepreneurial, Dakota. Think entrepreneurial, study entrepreneurship. If figure out how you can work for yourself somewhere along the way. So make sure that you're teething on Shark Tank and Inc. magazine, and take as much business and entrepreneurial courses that you can, and in school, because I want you to think like an entrepreneur, because I think that's going to be really critical going forward.
I love that. Thanks. Joel, we'll pass it on to you.
Well, I'm not a meteorologist, but I am a software developer. I do web development and app development for like iOS and Macs. And I would say that don't necessarily be discouraged because maybe you graduated with, I don't know, an English degree or something, and then you decide 3 years later, man, I really regret not going for, some sort of science degree that will allow you to get into this field. I found that unless you're gonna, plan to be a brain surgeon or certain other fields, in large part the degree is not that huge of a requirement. You can always find your way into a field just because you love the topic. And if you are a software person and also like weather, there's plenty of opportunity out there to write weather-related software, because I can only list a half a dozen great pieces of weather software that are fantastic that I love, and I can list dozens and dozens and dozens of pieces of weather-related software that are really bad, and we need more developers to make better software. So there's lots of opportunity out there, and that goes with what he was saying with being an entrepreneur. There's a lot of opportunity to make good weather apps and make money from them.
Yeah, that's good advice. We hear a version of that every now and then because it is super important in our field. Ricky, how about yourself?
Well, first off, the person who designs a Go 16 software
yes,
every day is going to get whatever money they want from me. So get on that if you want to bucks here and there. I've got two things of advice. The first one kind of piggybacks off of what Joel said, and that's if you're in school for meteorology, branch out a little bit. Don't just take meteorology classes. Don't just take the science classes. Get a minor if you can, and get a minor in something that has a lot of job opportunities. We have a lot of people at my university, not trying to deter anyone away, that have meteorology degrees but are having a hard time finding jobs. And that's kind of just the way our current situation is in the weather enterprise, especially the government sector with the hiring freeze. But make yourself multifaceted, not just, knowing weather, know something else, GIS, computer programming, because a lot of those fields can kind of work together with weather. And going with what Bill said can perhaps get you a job in an entrepreneurial kind of sense. My second thing is don't be afraid to reach out to people. When I was still in college, I reached out to James Spann and I sent him an email. I was like, hey, can I come visit you for a day and just kind of learn about what you do? And so on my fall break one year, I drove down to Alabama and spent a day with James Spann and learned a little bit about what he did. And it was a great learning opportunity, not just from a weather standpoint, but from a personal standpoint too, because, we see all these people as weather idols, but they're still people, true and full. And James really had the opportunity to speak to me, not so much in a weather sense, but almost in a personal sense, what I want to do in the future, what I want to do from a family sense. And it was really nice to speak to someone about that. So, and that same thing goes for NWA conferences. That's where I met Bill for the first time. And Bill was always nice, and he can speak for NWA and all how nice everyone is there. So
yeah, Ricky always got all the girls. So,
And just to add to what he said, I would suggest go take an introductory course into JavaScript into your engineering department. It's been used on practically every website in the last 20 years, and it's not going away anytime soon. And it's a good, quick, easy language to start on, and it gives you an idea of like what programmers do.
All right.
Yeah. So Kim, we'll let you wrap up the show here.
Well, I might go a different route, and maybe suggest, to think about the military. Since I was Air Force for 9 years and I went that route first, that, you have a job, or you're doing some cool forecasting stuff. You're forecasting all over the world. There's so many opportunities in the military for a meteorologist that may be something you think about as well. If you like to travel, if you like all different types of weather to forecast, You could be stationed in Nebraska and chase like I did. There's so many opportunities I think that's being missed that people overlook. Everybody is focused on college. And of course you go to college while you're in the military, and similar to what I did, and you've got all the operational experience of a meteorologist. Then you've got a degree, then you really have a great resume to get out there and work. So that's something I might, suggest you look into. Anybody that is worried about getting a job out of college, or maybe even going as an officer in the weather. Either you can be in the Marines. They have their own weather people. The Air Force has their own weather people, and the Navy as well. So it's something to think about. And also, I recommend if you are going to go the college route, definitely do an internship somewhere so you can get an idea of what it's really like. And so you really know if that's the route you want to take at a TV station or National Weather Service, or, just know the hours can be really brutal. And this kind of gives you an idea of what it's really like. So, I'm kind of pushing the military thing a little bit, only because I think there's so many, it's saturated in college right now with meteorology. And I just think that might be something that's missed sometimes.
That's
2 cents worth.
That's something I didn't think of until our podcast is only about a year old. And early on, I was speaking to some folks I know on Twitter, asking who I should have on as guests. And I was talking to a guy that's ex-military that was in the Air Force that used to do forecasting for an Air Force base, I think in Alabama somewhere. Is there an Air Force base in Alabama?
There is.
Yeah, I think that's
Maxwell.
it. And he was telling me, it's like, not a lot of people don't think about this, but every time a plane takes off, there's a weather forecast that happens prior to that.
Yeah,
absolutely. And don't forget that we have Joint Typhoon Warning Center. If you're into hurricanes, there's so many different places. We have our own version, or listen to me. I guess once you're military, you always are. But we have our own version of the Storm Prediction Center for the backup for the Storm Prediction Center when they would go down. So there's so many different routes you could take with that. And again, it's just limitless really in the military. But again, you do have to move, and there's a lot of things you have to think about. But I always feel like that gets missed. And it's like, I think it was such a great experience for me. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate that advice. I think it's the first time we've had someone talk about the military. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Wrapping up the show here. If you don't follow us on Twitter, you can follow us at the WX Junkies. You can listen to this podcast on iTunes or any podcast provider, and go ahead and give us a rating or review if you want. And all the content from the show, including the tweets that we discussed and the audio to the show, you can find it at theweatherjunkies.com. Next week, we have Min and Castle from Weather Hype. We're going to talk about social sciences and the importance they have in meteorology and climate. And if you don't already listen to all the weather podcasts that are part of National Weather Podcast Month, check them out. Stormfront Freaks, check them out. Carolina Weather Group, Weather Brains, Ice Station Houseman, Tornado Talk, Weather Hype, the list goes on. And thank you all for joining me tonight. Really appreciate it, and had a blast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was an honor to be here.
Thanks for having me. Same
Thanks
here.
a lot.
Sorry I wasn't on sooner, guys.
No worries.
I enjoyed the 15 minutes of fame. Thank you.
So for myself and everyone else here tonight, we'll see you next week.
All right. Bye, everybody. Good night.
Bye.
Bye.
Cal, I gotta go, Julia. We got cows.